Israeli occupation forces carry out a deadly airstrike in northern Lebanon, killing 23 people and injuring 8. Israeli shelling on Al-Mufti school kills 22 and wounds dozens. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Saudi Crown Prince oversee the signing of the Egyptian-Saudi Supreme Coordination Council. You're now watching Q News. I'm Karim Hatem. Let's start our bulletin with the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بيخوف.
Israel has issued military evacuation orders affecting more than a quarter of Lebanon following its military offensives in the southern and that began 2 weeks ago, according to the UN's refugee agency. The agency's Middle East director stated during a press briefing in Geneva that new Israeli evacuation orders impacting 20 villages in southern Lebanon have exacerbated the situation, resulting in widespread displacement across the country. Israeli occupation forces have carried out a deadly airstrike in the village of Ayuto, northern Lebanon, killing 23 people and injuring 8. Local media report this as the first Israeli airstrike to hit the Zagrata region. The attack targeted a residential building housing over 25 people. In a separate incident, Lebanese officials confirmed another Israeli airstrike near an aid convoy in the Beqa Valley, wounding a driver and causing minor damage to the trucks. Three paramedics have been killed in an airstrike targeting the health center in the Beqa Valley. The Lebanese news agency reported that Israeli occupation carried out a series of intense airstrikes at 8:30 a.m., targeting several areas in the outskirts of Qiliya and western Beqa. The agency also noted that Israeli aircrafts are still circling over the area. Tensions in the region escalate as Israeli forces intensify their military operations, targeting numerous sites in Lebanon and Gaza. The UN Security Council has raised serious concerns following attacks on peacekeeping positions.
In the last 24 hours, Israeli occupation forces have escalated their offensive by striking approximately 230 sites across Lebanon and Gaza, with a particular focus on Hezbollah's infrastructure. Israel claims these attacks targeted ground-to-ground missile launchers in Lebanon. However, these strikes have raised alarm internationally as they continue to cause widespread destruction and contribute to rising tensions in the region. The United Nations Security Council has voiced serious concerns following reports of Israeli fire hitting multiple UN peacekeeping positions in southern Lebanon. In response, the Council called on all parties to respect the safety of UN personnel and facilities, reiterating its support for the critical role played by UNIFIL in maintaining regional stability.
We are staying. It's important that there was a decision taken because we are in the south of Lebanon under a Security Council mandate.
UNIFIL spokesperson Andrea Tenenti has confirmed that peacekeeping forces will remain in place, underscoring their mandate from the Security Council. He emphasized the significance of maintaining the UN's presence in the region, pointing out that deliberate attacks on UNIFIL personnel have occurred.
There have been some deliberate attacks against our troops, and peacekeepers were injured.
Tenenti stressed the need for all parties to take necessary measures to safeguard peacekeepers, who are vital to preventing further escalation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded by suggesting that the best way to protect UNIFIL forces would be for them to temporarily relocate out of danger. He denied accusation that Israeli forces had intentionally targeted peacekeepers, instead blaming Hezbollah for using UN sites as cover for their attacks, including a drone strike on an Israeli military base. Netanyahu pledged to intensify military operations in Lebanon, indicating that further strikes, even on Beirut, are likely as the conflict persists.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed the accusations that Israeli forces deliberately target UNIFIL peacekeepers in Lebanon, calling them completely false. He reiterated his call for UNIFIL to withdraw from combat zones, stating that the military takes all precautions to avoid harming UN personnel. Netanyahu emphasized that the best way to ensure their safety is for UNIFIL to temporarily move out of harm's way.
The charge that Israel deliberately attacked UNIFIL personnel is...
Italy's Prime Minister has demanded greater security for all its soldiers deployed in Lebanon. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni added that Israel's actions are completely unjustified, in addition to being a blatant violation of UN resolutions. Meloni's comments came during an upper house Senate meeting ahead of a European Union leaders meeting in Brussels on October 17th. A plane carrying aid to Lebanon from the EU has left Italy as part of an initiative to send 3 planes to the country. According to the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations ECHO, the first of the 3 flights reached Beirut on October 11th. ECHO added that the planes were carrying hygiene items, blankets, emergency shelter kits and other items. UNICEF's Deputy Executive Director for Humanitarian Action has revealed that nearly 1.2 million children in Lebanon are being deprived of education. Over 400,000 have been displaced in the last 3 weeks. While some private schools continue to operate, the public school system has been severely impacted by the war, affecting Lebanon's most vulnerable, including Palestinian and Syrian refugees. And now to the latest developments in Gaza. "22 Palestinian civilians, including 15 children, were killed and dozens more were injured in Israeli shelling on Al-Mufti school, which is housing displaced people in the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza. The Palestinian civilian defense reported that the school was bombed with a heavy barrage of Israeli artillery shells while displaced individuals were sheltering inside. The school is run by the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Bodies of Palestinians have been seen pulled out of buildings in Jabalia as Israeli military operations continue. Israeli forces tightened their squeeze around Jabalia in the north of the enclave on Tuesday, with Palestinian health officials saying that at least 11 people were killed by Israeli fire near Al-Fallujah in Jabalia, while 10 others were killed in Bani Shila in eastern Khan Yunis and the south when an Israeli missile struck a house. For more analysis, we now go to our newsroom with Riham Morsi. Over to you, Riham.
Thank you, Karim. To help us analyze the situation on the ground in Gaza, we're joined by Mr. Nizar Majalli, Israeli affairs expert. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q. First, could we start off by asking how can Israel be held accountable before the international courts for its crimes in Gaza? We've seen the ICJ come out with, sub-rulings, and the ICC, and there have been a few, countries that have submitted evidence towards Israeli crimes. Do you think they will be held accountable in international courts?
Unfortunately, what happens now shows that the whole world, up till now, does not know how to hold Israel accountable properly for its practices. Even the citizens in our region feel that the whole world is neglecting what Israel is doing and ignoring what happens. They do not take any procedures to stop Israel from doing this. Israel used to be one of the rare countries that was established by a UN resolution. However, this country is neglecting and ignoring all the international resolutions, including the law of war. It ignores everything. It feels that the world makes it free to do whatever they want in Israel. There's no procedures at all.
Sir, we've seen the north of Gaza facing severe and dire situations, including bombings, being cut off from humanitarian aid. Do you think that Israel will continue to implement the general's plan when it comes to northern Gaza?
The plan they are following in Gaza is developed by a group of generals in the right wing of Israel who suggest that Israel would displace all the residents in North Gaza with no exception. They give them a grace period of 1 week, and if they do not leave by force, by starving, by preventing access to water, by these ways they would leave. They already started doing this, and everyone sees what happens in the south. They want them to leave to south of Gaza, but with the practice of the Israeli leadership, they are burning the women, the children, the civilians with the special bombs. So people are afraid. They do not know if they should stay and be starved or they should leave, and then they would be exposed to bombing and burning. They leave no option for anyone. The whole world is not aware what happens in Gaza. Everyone is busy with what happens in Lebanon, what would happen with Iran. That's why the cause of Gaza became secondary issue, despite the fact that the Israeli army is continuing its operations that would lead to the killing of the children and burning them without any limits. They do this randomly without setting a certain area. There's no safe place in Gaza.
Well, sir, even though you say that the international community is more concerned with what's happening in Lebanon, but we have seen condemnation from several countries towards what's happening in the northern Gaza region, especially the siege, but there hasn't been a lot of action. Do you think that the United States will use tools to pressure Israel to lift the siege on northern Gaza, or will it be business as usual when it comes to how the United States deals with Israel?
The United States is partner to Israel in this war. Now there are warnings from the United States, and in the month increasing the supply of humanitarian aid to Gaza and stop striking Beirut, while taking into consideration human rights principles. All of this would be in a month. So they have 1 month to do whatever they want. After that, they will hold Israel accountable. So there is a sense that the United States is a partner. The West believes that also the United States is a partner. In the Arab world, there is a great desire to have peace in the region, to have friendly relationships with the Americans, with the Westerns. The Arab world wants to have a different reality, but the war in Gaza, the role played by the West, makes the Arabs and the residents of this region very far from the friendly relationships and from also the values they discuss, because double standard. When the war happened in Ukraine, everyone started to yell about it, but they're silent about what happens in Palestine. So it's a great disappointment because of this policy. Even the friends of the United States and the West in the world, in the Arab world, feel really embarrassed. They are unable to interpret this policy, this double standard, which delays all the operations, programs and projects being implemented in the Arab world for the welfare of the human being. All of this is being slowed down because of the new understanding of these values, because these values turned out to be not honest with double standards.
Well, sir, since you talked about the idea of double standards, we've seen, as you said, with Ukraine, sanctions being put in place, talking about upholding international law and so forth. How do you think that international law can compel Israel to facilitate, for instance, a basic human right, entry of aid into the Gaza Strip? Or is it just like empty words that we've seen where, the international community condemns what's happening in northern Gaza, but they're not necessarily doing much to apply international law?
Definitely. First of all, there are aids, a lot of aids, but Hamas is controlling a big part of it, and they are trade in these aids. Even the prices are increased 10 times. People are unable to buy the minimum level of the essential needs they need. Life is unbearable, and Israel adds to all of this the danger of killing. Inside Israel, there's discussion. They are wondering why the world is against them. Here they do not talk about the governments, but they talk about the citizens in the streets and the international organizations. There was a TV show or a talk show saying that, and the presenter said that the world takes a stance against Israel because they see things that we do not see. This draws our attention to the fact that the people in Israel are not aware of what happens inside Gaza or in Lebanon, because the whole Israeli media is recruited and they do not reflect the truth regarding Lebanon or Gaza. That's why they continue in this war blindly, and the government exploits this situation to continue its war operations without any accountability. The Western countries that are supposed to have a big responsibility at that time now, especially with the current situation in the Arab world, in order to change the Arab reality towards a better trend towards peace, they are feeling that they are stabbed from the back. Here I do not talk about the people or the civil organizations in the Western world. Here I'm talking about the Western leaders. They represent the volatile West people towards what happens in Lebanon, in Gaza.
Okay, that was Mr. Nizar Mijali, Israeli affairs expert. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q. Back to you, Karim, in the studio.
Thank you, Reham Morsi from our newsroom. We're still in Gaza as Palestinian men and women have gathered at Gaza's Nasser hospital to mourn their loved ones following an Israeli strike on a residential building in Khan Yunis that killed 10 people. Health officials have reported that the building was housing displaced Palestinians. Prayers were held at the hospital where bodies were laid on the ground. The Israeli military strikes have killed at least 40 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip after Israeli forces intensified their operations around Jabalia in the northern enclave. Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani has said Israel deliberately chose to expand its aggression to implement pre-planned schemes in the West Bank and Lebanon. In his annual speech to open the Shura Council, Al Thani said Israel had done so because it sees that the scope for that is available. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has led a pro-Palestinian demonstration in Havana. Thousands of demonstrators, including 250 Palestinian medical students living in Cuba, marched along the boardwalk demanding peace in Gaza. The march had been due to take place on October 7th, but it was postponed due to Hurricane Milton, which lashed Cuba and Florida last week. Now let's take a deeper dive on our African continent with Salma Marwan in our newsroom. Over to you, Salma.
Thank you, Karim. And now we move on to the latest developments in Africa. The World Food Programme has said millions of people across southern Africa are facing the worst food crisis in decades, warning that its ability to provide relief risks being constrained by funding shortfalls. The UN agency said historic drought conditions in a record 5 countries, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, has caused them to declare a state of disaster and called for international humanitarian support, while Angola and Mozambique are also badly affected. The agency plans to bring food distributions and cash assistance to more than 6.5 million people in the 7 hardest hit countries to cover the so-called lean season until the next harvest in March 2025. The Grand Egyptian Museum has launched its trial opening, with Egypt's Great Pyramid serving as a backdrop. During the trial opening period, visitors can view the main exhibition halls, the Grand Hall, the Grand Staircase, the commercial area, and the outdoor gardens. Visitors can see the statue of Ramses II in the museum's atrium, along with other pharaonic artifacts. When it's completed, the Grand Egyptian Museum will be one of the largest, most modern, and most renowned museums in the world. Kenya has begun a landmark operation to relocate 50 elephants from the overcrowded Moya National Reserve to the more spacious Aberdare National Park. The 42-square-kilometer Moya Reserve, designed to host around 50 elephants, has seen its population surge to 156. The operation involves a team of over 100 wildlife specialists using helicopters, trucks, and advanced tracking technology. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Saudi Crown Prince have overseen the signing of the Egyptian-Saudi Supreme Coordination Council. The two sides also agreed to encourage and protect mutual investments between the two countries. Moreover, the talks addressed regional developments, most notably the situations in the Gaza Strip and Lebanon, where there was agreement on the need to stop the escalation. And now we go back to Karim in the studio.
Thank you. That was Salma Marwan with the African updates. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Let's take a look at our headlines. Israeli occupation forces carry out a deadly airstrike in northern Lebanon, killing 23 people and injuring 8. Israeli shelling on Al-Mufti school kills 22 and wounds dozens. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Saudi Crown Prince oversee the signing of the Egyptian-Saudi Supreme Coordination Council. That concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. For real-time updates, connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.